this. Okay. Hello, we are Nourished Nomad, and we wanted to make you a bit of a video about how we got here. It's something that people are asking us is how we got here. And it's kind of a big conversation for us to start. And so just thought we'd release some videos, who we are, present ourselves a little bit more. And one of the things that is coming up a lot is that we've both made really incredible changes in our lives, throughout our lives, but especially, I would say, in this last year. And so we really have gone through a process of taking our lives back for ourselves, and being able to give a lot more has caused us to say, okay, we need to tell people more about these concepts. And yeah, I think it's interesting to know that there's different ways that we both arrived to this place that we're at now, and we both have a lot more that we'd like to do. And so it's sort of like a check-in of how we got here and how we're currently taking our lives back, or how we have in the past. So welcome to Kat, and I'm Kate, if people don't know.
Yes.
Hopefully you know because you found us, but
Yeah, I think another really cool point to add on to just your introduction, Kate, is I think one of the beautiful things about the two of us is we're never here to set each other up or any of our followers up to be like, this is what you must do to reach X result. And I think you'll see as you get to know us both, we both make big changes in our lives with the underlying principle being the same, but we oftentimes do it in really different ways. And that's
very
super
different.
cool and
Yeah.
super encouraged.
Yeah, it's true. And honestly, I love hearing how people do things differently to us as well. Because sometimes there's stuff that Kat does, like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that, or, I wouldn't have added that in, but that's a great thing to add in, and likely, back at Kat. And there's also different needs. That's one of the things that will come up here. So yeah, really excited. So taking our lives back, we're here. We've taken a great portion of our lives back for ourselves. Maybe before we get on to that, like a little bit of what that actually means. Because if someone has never felt the need to take their life back for themselves, what does that mean? Why? Yeah,
Yeah.
why did we do that?
Yeah, so for me, what it means is, in every personality test, in astrology and everything, my personality type is neurodivergent. So I don't fit in a nicely tied box of what society says is normal. And I have tried to put myself in that box forever. So tried to be part of the 5 a.m. club, tried to have a 9 to 5 job multiple times. And it sucked the life out of me and just deadened my soul. And so for me, prioritizing myself really has been to work in a way that works for me finally. And if that means, well, I don't talk to humans until after 11 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't mean I'm not working, but putting myself first and getting my needs met first thing in the morning is something that's hugely important to me. And also giving myself permission to work at 11 o'clock at night if that's when I feel inspired to be creative.
That was something that came up for me in my journey as well. A few years ago, I had a business strategist call me out for saying, you were afraid to work late because you thought it was a bad idea. But if that was when you were inspired, you're welcome to work at that time. And I think an overarching sort of idea of taking your life back is feeling as though the choices that you're making are your own choices. So we're all going to have responsibilities. Kat has, I would say, arguably more responsibilities than what I currently need to carry, just because of where we're at in our lives. But the responsibilities that we have are to ourselves first, to our inner selves first, and to make decisions that way likely will improve your relationships with others, but it can take some courage to make those first steps. Yeah. So taking our lives back is really like, okay, we've been living for someone else. We've been living for ideas that other people have of us. And we've perhaps been living in ways that don't serve our highest need. They serve some need. Maybe they serve everyone else's needs, and we do a great job at it. But there's no real deeper underlying purpose there.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Yeah,
100%.
taking our lives back.
Yeah, and I'd also say if people don't actually know, like if they just feel like something in their life isn't working, I would encourage the first step to be like, find out more about what makes you up, make what your makeup is. Like do some personality tests, look at astrology. That for me was so eye-opening. So get curious about yourself.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's great advice. And I would say the whole list here, it is about being curious about where you have room for expansion, because we get really well that you can't change everything at once. If you were to leave every one of your responsibilities behind and take your life back for yourself, it likely would cause harm. And so you do have to think carefully about how you step away from certain things, how you step into others. So the first one on our list on how to take your life back is permission to be yourself. So give yourself permission to be yourself, and kind of in working with that, prioritizing yourself and your needs and your desires. So kind of what we've just been talking about. You got to get to know yourself in order to know what you want. And how are you going to prioritize what you want unless you know those things, right? It seems so simple, but it requires effort. You've got to apply effort to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And giving permission to be yourself, I feel like is a very challenging thing to do when there are ideals set out in society in some way. Even if your ideal, so like Kat and I could probably relate to this. I would think that there's an ideal nonconformist or social activist type, or there's an ideal nutritionist, right? There's an ideal shaman. What does that look like? And so permission to just be yourself and your own unique expression of those things, probably step number one for a reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess moving from that place, the next piece is making decisions from yourself and from your own internal purpose and guidance. So without wanting to make that super vague, one way to honor yourself is to know yourself, right? So the example that Kat gave is perfect, that when you wake up, it is not in alignment. When you look at all of Kat's personality tests, when you look at the way that her life has shown her what works and what doesn't, true experience is a great teacher, right? Personal experience is a great teacher. When you look at also her genuine desires for how to live a life, staying in your own sacred place in the mornings is important and really only needs to be stepped outside of when there's a greater priority. The only person who's going to know those priorities are you.
Absolutely.
And so if you're the only one who gets to decide, okay, that's my internal guidance is saying, listen, the only reason I'm getting up and leaving the house is if I have a plane to catch before that time, or if I've got to take my son to school, that's a reason to get up and get out and talk to a human, right? That's like probably one of the only reasons that shows up.
But to jump on that, taking my my son to school piece is, I used to then book things like, I already have to take Luke to school, so I might as well just book blah. And so really getting clear on, I take my son to school and then I come home and then I drop right back into my morning quiet ritual piece. And that works. Like, my son gets to school and I still get what I need.
Absolutely. And I mean, echoing on my side, my life does look very different. Our lives look very different, even though we believe so similarly about how to live them. That one of the things I needed to do was say, I really need to be around animals. I'm really not in a position to feel as though it's appropriate for me to take care of animals when I don't desire living in a specific spot for a long period of time. And so doing the farming at the alpaca farm that I just did was like a sacrifice that really actually was brought from an internal purpose place. I'm the only one who would have known that. No one would have written for me in my life, hey, I think this is a really good idea. You should go live with 85 alpacas for about 3 months and write yourself. No one would have decided that. For me, it was an internal calling that said, you need to spend time moving your body and with nature before you get into this next phase of your career. I saw what was coming down the pipeline and went, I'm going to need a little bit of that, a little dose of sunshine and movement before getting into that.
Yeah.
So making decisions from like that internal purpose place, like what is your overall purpose? Does that align to it? I think is really helpful.
Absolutely. Which I think kind of moves us into the next point, which is just that being connected to nature is really one of the ways that both of us have taken our lives back.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great segue, Kate. Had no idea that was the next one on the list.
So they jump right into there with you.
That's perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, again, getting out in nature looks very different for both of us. You know, Kate's was to actually go and stay on an alpaca farm and, you know, throw herself into really great farm work every day. Mine is I walk. I walk every morning. It's the first thing I do. I literally roll out of bed, put my walking clothes on, and there's a great little path about less than a 5-minute walk from my house. And I have not missed my morning walk since mid-April.
You're
And
doing so good with it.
I
Side note
know.
celebration for you.
Yay.
Yay.
But yeah, I just find it is the way, because the way I move through my day, because of the way I schedule myself, that walk is where I can drop into what my intuition and guides are guiding me towards for the day. So I generally have like a to-do list, but then I really want to move from a place of inspired action. And for me, using that morning walk, connecting with nature, tapping into my higher self and my guides, when I come home from that walk, I know exactly what the rest of my day is going to look like.
Yeah, you have that clarity and probably feel more connected to yourself as well, right? Rather than other people's needs or whatever else is going on your social media feed or anything like that in the morning.
Yeah.
And another thing too that got brought up for me is thinking about nature being our true home, and this idea that a lot of people are so disconnected to nature, and we are so not used to following seasonal changes or connecting to moon or sun cycles or anything like that, that often we are not even operating from a place of being calm or balanced when we say that we are. So when we've just found a ground zero point within our modern, buzzy Western world, and then we finally say, okay, all right, I feel relaxed. Still, if you're not deeply connected to nature, that's actually, there's so many more layers of true inner connection and body peace, I guess, that are accessible to you that we don't even go and explore. So when you're making decisions from just that zero point of what we can gather here in the Western world, you're still not even at a point which is truly, truly you. And that's okay. We all make our sacrifices as life, goes on, and there's always nature to hold us for moments of that. But just, I guess, for me, I always get brought up to this idea that not really truly myself until I've processed something fully in nature. So when I get overwhelmed, like,
I totally agree.
Right? Like the other day I came home and I was telling you a bit about this, as I was like really exhausted. I'd taken on some things from some other people, some stories and things that really had my heart hurting. I was like feeling really emotional because I really just thought about their lives and the ways that they're suffering. And I went straight to the lake as soon as I got back. I have to drop this at the lake. Mm-hmm. Because it was the only way that I could think to return to my own thoughts and not be feeling other people's, right? So yeah.
Well, and that was me yesterday, right? Like I was really having a hard day, and you like said to me, "What do you need to do?" And I'm like, "I need to go to the forest." Yeah. And the like half an hour walk in the middle of the forest, and I have been on fire, creativity and productivity wise since. And all it took was a half an hour. And I used to beat myself up for like, oh well, who are you to be able to go to the forest in the middle of the day? Can't you just stick to your list?
Yeah. We have a lot of shame in this. I mean, a lot of this taking our lives back has to do with work, but we have a lot of shame just taking time out for ourselves in general.
Absolutely.
In our culture.
Great point. Great point.
Yeah. So no reason for that other than other people's things that they've said, which are not true unless you make them true. So you can just say goodbye to that one. That's a society standard you don't need.
Absolutely.
And the next one that we had on here, I really like, and I think it's much more in cat tone to talk about, which is that you need to look, if you're going to take your life back for yourself, you have to look for opportunities to embrace your journey along the way and celebrate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what this one really means to me is, oftentimes we have this really fantastic goal. Ooh, I'm getting very glowy. Oftentimes we have this really fantastic goal, and that's all we focus on. And we forget to actually sink into the moment, to actually enjoy where we're at, to even know if we're in our body or not. And so recognizing, again, back to nature is very cyclical in nature. And so are we. So recognizing that there's going to be some days you're going to jump out of bed, you're going to get so much done, it's going to feel like, woo, I'm a human today. And then you're going to have other days where it's a slower pace, and maybe you've got some feelings coming up and you need to honor those and feel them. But every day, if we embrace what shows up for us and really act from that place, and trust that how you feel today isn't going to be how you're going to feel forever and ever. It is going to cycle, and just enjoy where you're at, or try to at least recognize the discomfort isn't going to be there forever.
Absolutely. Love that point. A lot of people are just too afraid of discomfort these days. And the only way, through it is through it. So you got to be through it at some point. And usually we're given appropriate levels of discomfort that we can face, even though it feels challenging. And yeah, it's interesting that you talk to about, like not rushing, timing, and simply embracing where you are, because I think a lot of the reason we don't do that is because we're not used to celebrating in large communities anymore. In general, that happened way before the pandy ever hit. Celebration isn't just like a part of our way, because we move so quickly and we expect and demand so much. Like, industrialization has changed so much the expectation that we have on humans on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And while we've risen to the occasion, it's not necessarily been overall beneficial. It's not actually been sustainable either. And this is not just saying that, our world's dying. Like, okay, sure, maybe it always is. And maybe there's a bit of a rushing of the process. But if you're not sitting back and celebrating, you're really not aware of anything. And you don't actually have clarity. And so the only way to move forward, move ahead, and grow is to take that time. I always talk about integration and celebration being the two things we're missing most in this world right now in order to have complete cycles of healing. Yeah.
And just complete cycles of being.
Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true.
Being like a whole person.
So true. Yeah, you don't have to be tuned into like specific healing things to really understand that concept of you've got to feel things in your body, sort of let it process and land in you in order to make sense. And then you've also got to celebrate it in order to have clarity, because our brain is so good at fixating on what needs to change. It's so good at analyzing and reflecting, but not so good at celebrating. So you got to help it out. And the last point is one that I make all the time and has come in play. So it's interesting because you're also talking about looking at planets and the cycles in which you have energy or motivation to do things. For our business, I tend to use you because we tend to look at the planets and where we might be more optimized to do things. So we knew that today was going to be an easier day for us to hop on and chat. Not the most optimal day, but we knew that we'd be able to get it done today simply just by knowing where our energies would be. And we have tried doing things on days where it was not bound to do it. And Kat will go look it up after and go, that's exactly why that didn't happen. And it totally matches where we were at, right?
And now we're starting to look at the calendar first instead of arbitrarily picking a deadline and then
we figured the system out.
We have. So.
Yeah. And so a big part of that is also removing arbitrary deadlines. And I think arbitrary deadlines are like, I don't know, I think they're like a sickness of the modern work world. I really do think, because when you take inspired action, like you were saying before, when you take inspired action, you're much more likely to get to your eventual goal or result or reward of completion. Whereas if you add in a deadline and you go, that has to be done by this Friday, that has to come out by this time, and there's no inspired action moment before then, sure, some people would say it's a good idea just to face it, prove it, don't let procrastination get in the way. But if you're frequently working, there's no reason you need to force that to be exactly how it is. And so when we start looking at, okay, there's other things at play, there's other factors, even filming, even if we decided, okay, this video, well, this is a perfect example. This video was originally meant to be yesterday. And yesterday there were other priorities and needs that came up that made a lot more sense for us being productive today. And we were able to clear a bunch of things out and get a bunch of things done. And because we removed the arbitrary deadline, instead of saying, we really didn't complete that goal, that's now a failure. Failures are okay, but we don't love them as humans, and with egos, we don't love them.
Well, and I also think because inherently what goes with a failure is that sense of shame again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you can remove, like, yeah, we didn't hit our target today, but you know what? Things didn't line up. And there's no shame attached to that, not
Yeah.
meeting that deadline, because like you always tell me, you're like, we picked the deadline. So if
Yeah.
it's now not working for us, then we can shift it without any shame or guilt or any
Yeah.
of that stuff coming up.
Exactly. So this point is like, especially for entrepreneurs, because it's like you make this up. But for everyone, if for everyone in their life, they're making this up too. Like it, it really is. There's very few things that absolutely, absolutely have to be by a specific deadline. And a lot of the time we create urgency just for sake of pleasing others or showing as if you're stressed. Yeah, removing arbitrary deadlines is a big way to take your life back. When you're talking about not living for other people, removing timelines, very, very, very helpful. Stuff still gets done. Stuff actually for us happens faster. It happens
Absolutely.
faster not having, because we have a running list of things that we really want to make sure get out and are getting created. We do more than if we had structured it out in such a linear way. And you know what? We still have a timeline. We have a calendar. We have a timeline. And we very rarely, sometimes we hit early and sometimes we hit late. So we very rarely get so off that it doesn't match.
Absolutely. And we always have multiple things that we can work on. So like if this didn't feel good today, then, you know, maybe we would have written this instead of filmed it as a video, or maybe we would
Exactly.
have gone outside and shot some pictures, or there's
Yeah.
like, there's so many different things that you can tap into that energy and do what just really is flowing for you in the day.
I think what that brings up for me too is that finding comfort, pleasure, enjoyment, and freedom to choose or believing that you're adaptable are really, really important for taking your life back. Those are all really feminine qualities. So if they don't come natural, then just pick one and start with one of these
Yeah.
things.
And I wanted to add to this because, you know, people who are listening to this who are in a more traditional job setting might be saying like, this will never work for me. But I teach a course on learning how to kind of work with the elements daily. And one of the people who just took my course last time I offered it actually reached out to me and said she works in a 9 to 5 kind of finance-based job, so like very structured. And she said, you know, I'm finding I'm scheduling my week now more using the elements of the moon. So I do all of my like written tasks on one day and my meetings on another day. So even if you do live a more traditional life, there's ways that you can go with the flow within somebody else's arbitrary deadlines.
Yeah, and in fact, when you're making the choice to work a traditional job, which power to you, I wish I could, to be honest. It would have been a lot easier than this path. But when you choose that, remember that you're making a choice to do that. That is your choice, right? It is so easy to get sucked into the gossip and complaining and negative nature that a lot of workplaces have because a lot of people don't feel excited by their choice to work, right? But you are the one who steps in those shoes and goes to that office or, you know, sits at home these days, maybe. But you're the one who chooses to do that work. And even if it feels like, well, it wasn't much of a choice, it's something I'm good at and I needed to do it. Please know you could have done any other thing with your time, you know? And so removing those deadlines could also be something that you challenge your workplace to do better, right? Change comes from within. So,
Absolutely. Yep, for
yeah,
sure. Yep, there's
that's
lots of, and I mean, like I said at the beginning, there's lots of ways, different ways to integrate a lot of these changes into your life that will look even different than what Kate and I are doing in our lives.
totally. So if you're not following us already, please follow along. We'll link all of our stuff down below, and it's Nourish Nomad Co. So you can find us at a bunch of different spots, and we'll link, you know, the program Kat talked about and whatever else we chatted about here.
And would also love to know how you're bringing some of these changes into your life. So drop a comment or reach out and just let us know how you're taking your life back.
Yeah, and it's a conversation. So if we were talking and then you realize, oh, maybe I need to take my life back, you know, I'm starting at step one. Tell us how step one's going. Or if you're a seasoned pro and you know more than us, we want to know that too. So yeah, fill us in, let us know. We'll keep the conversation going. And thank you for listening to us. We'll be back soon to, you know, share more of how we got here and where we're going.
Absolutely.